Guys, week 6 of fantasy football is in the books, and we have a ton to discuss as we do every single week. Risers in the rankings, fallers in the rankings, takeaways, rest of season rankings, and at the end we got the waiver wire portion of the show, an early look at the waiver wire as we head into week 7. And there are some interesting, sneaky, good names on that waiver wire, so definitely stick around. Now, let's just begin here. I was going to say let's begin with Rico Dowdle, but first I need to say let's begin with a general feeling, okay, towards fantasy. Now, at this point in the season, maybe you're 1-5, maybe you're 5-1, maybe you're 6-0, maybe you're 2-4, maybe you're 0-6. This is the point in the season, and we'll talk about specific strategies, specific players, who to target, depending on what your record is, and things to do, but it is not over. And you might hear that, and you might just say, like, okay, well, it doesn't apply to me because I'm 5-1, I'm winning my league. No, it is not over. Because you in first place at 5-1, 6-0, even 4-2, tied for first, whatever you are, you're very comfortable, you're happy where you are in your league. But those teams right now that are 2-4, 3-3, they're jawing, they're clawing back to come get you from first place, and they will get hot heading into playoffs. So you need to stay hot, okay? Now, if you're 2-4, 1-5, what I suggest, go into your lineup. I tell this to my subscribers, go into your lineup, okay? Only thing that matters is next week. It's the only thing that matters. 1-4 and 1-5, 2-4. Place only players in that you look at them and you're like, I'm happy to be starting you. For example, Ramondre Stevenson in a great matchup next week doesn't count. Trevion Henderson doesn't count. Guys that you look at and you go, I have no worries. And if they don't do well, whatever. But from your point of view, no worries. You take everybody else, you put them to the bench. That might be your whole team. And now you begin filling in those spots with players that meet the criteria. I have no worries about you, whatever it is, okay? If you have a Jalen Hurts in the lineup and you can trade him for a Drake Maye and something else to fill out your lineup, you start doing those moves and we will discuss them. That's my little speech here to begin the video just on the overall state of fantasy. And just if you take one thing away, it is not over. Now, let's begin with Rico Dowdle, the first player we'll discuss today. I tweeted yesterday. I'll try to find it real quick, but let me just see if I can grab this tweet here. But yeah. So we're going to redo an all-time NFL draft, and it's going to begin, honestly, 101 Tom Brady and 102, pretty quickly, don't need to wait for the pick to be in, Rico Dowdle. This player, this young man, you know what it is with guys like Rico, okay? And there's another player that we'll talk about today who meets this criteria at a different position, and I mentioned it last week, but with Rico, you watch the game, like I played him today, and you just have no chance of winning, right? Unless you have, a JT or something like that. 2 players that drop 50 combined, 60 combined. Here's the thing. You watch him play, and you scream at the TV. You're like, how? Just tackle him, guard him, do something. They can't. You think they don't know that, right? Like, genuinely, I'm screaming at my TV all day. You got to tackle him. How is he ripping off 9 yards, 7 yards? Oh my God, every play is a 50. They can't. And those are the best players. Sounds obvious and a little stupid, but those are the best players for fantasy football. Whenever you have that feeling, you want that guy. Very simple. So this game is very simple. So, like I said, scored 30 points here 2 weeks in a row. The head coach did not commit to Chuba Hubbard at the end, at the press conference. So, as the starter going forward. So I do expect a 50-50 split here between Rico and Hubbard. Honestly, I think both are fine flex plays. And I could see a world where Rico just continues to steal this job. And we just look at his last 2 games here, 32 points, 33 points. Next up is Kimani Vidal, and we will talk about him on the waiver wire portion of the show, okay? Briefly, but it looks as though, so they started the game splitting. Vidal and Haskins did. As you can see, Haskins ended with only 7 opportunities, 14 yards on the ground, right? Vidal went crazy. 22 opportunities, 124 yards, over 6.8 a carry, caught 3 of those 4 targets. So I like it. I'm happy, okay? Indianapolis is a hard matchup coming up. Minnesota, Tennessee gets easier. But we've heard that Omarion Hampton's going to be out for longer than the 4 games. So you got 1 against Miami, 2, 3, 4 against Tennessee. I mean, when's he coming back? Is he going to come back here against Vegas, which is week 13 after their bye? That would give him 6 games missed, plus the bye week. That's week 13 against Vegas. Maybe. Now, if that's the case, both of these players need to be rostered, even Haskins still. We saw this scenario with Michael Carter, where Michael Carter came in and was a monster, was the lead back, 70% of snaps, whatever it was, or opportunities, I should say. And then next week we got Bam Knight in there, right, splitting the snaps with him. So this situation is not over. Given that the absence is extended, I think they will call for some help. But Vidal looked very good. He must be added. If they don't call anyone for help, he's a flex play. But before we anoint him, I was guilty of this with Woody Marks. Not really Michael Carter, because I learned from Woody Marks, but we've seen it a couple times where these guys come in, have these great games, we anoint them to, locked in RB2 status, and then they don't really deliver. So just be careful with Vidal. Not a knock on him at all. Just let's see what they decide to do. We'll talk about him more at the end of the show. We have Jonathan Taylor here, just continuing his, I don't even know what's the word, like conquest? Yeah, that's probably the word. His conquest towards RB1 overall finish, another 25 opportunities today, got in the end zone again, 23 plus points. I mean, yeah, we look at this, 4 games with 23 plus points. Another elite running back, it's a bit of a running back section of the show here, is Devon Achane. 8 yards a carry, 22 opportunities. This was his best game of the year. I put out a tweet predicting, and by the way, those predictions are just for fun, but a fun one I had was this week that Achane would score a 50-yard touchdown. He scored a 49-yard touchdown. 22 opportunities, as I said, caught 4 of 6 targets. So that is now 6 plus targets in all but 2 games this year. Very good. 8 a carry, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He's looking legit, and he's looking like a top 5 running back to close the season. He doesn't care about the drama in the Dolphins locker room, not at all. Now, I mentioned that there was a player, okay? That there was a player who is this type of player, and I ranted about him on the last episode, so I will keep this short. Who, when you watch the games, you're like, I can't believe this dude. Like, put 3 guys on him. How is the defense allowing this, right? And his name is Jaxson Smith-Njigba, so a little bit about this guy, a little bit about JSN. 13 targets yesterday, 8 catches, 162 yards and a touchdown, 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games. 4 games this year, over 100 receiving yards. I doubt any other player besides Puka has 3. Okay, I think Pearsall has 2. There's a couple others, like random guys, who just hit 100 a couple times. Kendrick Bourne, for example, has 2 of those games. Jaxson Smith-Njigba, 4 games over 100 yards, receiving 30 points yesterday against a good Jacksonville defense. He is absolutely unstoppable. You cannot guard him. It's close to the line of scrimmage. It's middle of the field. It's deep down on the sidelines. It's in the end zone. It's everywhere. You cannot guard him. He is absolutely in contention for wide receiver 1 overall. Puka got hurt yesterday. We'll talk about that in a bit. Amon-Ra St. Brown, we see the Lions struggle when they are down in games. So, for example, if they're underdogs, right, we got to kind of maybe downgrade St. Brown just a tad. Still had like 10 targets, looked great last night other than the 1 drop, which I'm sure he won't let that happen again. But JSN, I told you guys, this reminds me of like Jahmyr Gibbs from last year, where he could just sneakily finish PPR wide receiver 1 through 18 games. He's in his prime, okay? And he could just be, honestly, wide receiver 1 rest of season. That's where I'm at with him. I don't see myself ranking him lower than that this week, at least, because you have Puka on the injury. You have St. Brown in a good matchup versus Tampa Bay, so maybe St. Brown could be 1, but Puka's 1 or 2 for the wide receivers this week. Top 2 or 3 rest of season, and really approaching wide receiver 1 overall rest of season. We'll see Puka's injury, but if like Puka were to miss 2 or 3 games, and I don't think that's the case since he came back in, but I'm not a doctor, you'd see JSN just vault to wide receiver 1 overall. We had Brian Thomas Jr. He actually had 2 touchdowns yesterday, but one of them was called back. So Brian Thomas is right back now into, low-end wide receiver 2, like 20 to 24, 18 to 24 on a weekly basis among wide receivers. Let's see. Sorry, I just had a short circuit. eight catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown. As I said, he had 2. The one got called back. So could have had even a bigger day. We really like to see this for Brian. Again, a tough matchup here versus Seattle. And I think I said before JSN's matchup was tough. Yeah, versus the Jaguars. I might have misspoken and said Seattle. But these 2 wide receivers played each other. Both delivered. Got to be happy with that. We have Tetairoa Mcmillan, who could have had a much bigger day, honestly. But very happy to see him get in the end zone not once but twice. Only caught 3 of 5 targets. But it was the Rico show. I mean, honestly, this was the Rico show. I don't think it's going to be too much of a concern going forward. I don't think Rico is going to have 200 yards from scrimmage every game. But the schedule next week's tough for McMillan. He gets Sauce Gardner. You get Buffalo, Green Bay. So there's a bit of a stretch here that's not that good in terms of matchups. But, he's the guy. You have Coker coming back. Jatavian Sanders coming back. All of this helps Bryce Young. And we've been saying this for weeks. This is why we liked Bryce Young. We liked McMillan because it's just an offense that was at the bottom and is now going to, ideally trend up ever so slowly. But yes, trend up. George Pickens just dominated again. Matchup, CeeDee Lamb or not, whatever it is, put this guy in your lineup. He just similarly, he did not leave any room for Javonte Williams to get going in this game. So 11 targets for Pickens, tied the season high. 9 catches was a season high. 168 yards was a season high. 1 or more touchdown now in 5 straight games. He has 6 in that span. Okay, 30-plus points. I think that he's going to remain a top 12 wide receiver even when CeeDee Lamb returns. All right, next up, who do we have here? Okay, we talked about Puka. Had his worst game of the season because he missed about half of it with this ankle injury. So he left the game. It seemed pretty bad, but he ended up returning, okay? So McVay said that's an ankle injury. His status for week 7 is to be determined. I'm not sure. They have the bye week 8, right? So I'm wondering if they just sit him this week, let him rest up over the bye. He comes back against New Orleans when, of course, my boy in my league has him. I'm playing him, and he just, in my face probably drops 15 catches, right? That might be an ideal plan for them. But we don't know. We really don't know. It's too early to downgrade. I'm recording this very early in the morning. It's still dark out on Monday morning. We still don't know. Now, if Puka is active, whatever, he's going to be in the lineup. It's pretty simple. If he's not active, if he's going to play limited snaps, then we talk about it. But honestly, I'm pretty confident in saying if he's active, play him, okay? Chris Olave, season high, 98 receiving yards. It was nice to see him on a bit of a deep play here. You like what you see from the Saints until they get to the 5-yard line and Taysom Hill goes in. I texted my league. I'm like, this is why if you have a Saints player, you got to consider what you're doing because it's awesome. Like literally until they get to the 10-yard line and Taysom Hill comes in. And it sounds silly, but he's going to do this 6 or 7 times a year where they wildcat snap it to him. The defense acts like they've never seen this before and they just fall over and he walks in the end zone. It happens like 6 or 7 times a year. You're missing out on points from Olave, Kamara, Kendre Miller, even Jawan Johnson if you're streaming, okay? So if you have a Saints player, I'm always looking to sell high. Olave is another one of these guys where, low-end wide receiver 2, 10-plus targets in every game but one this year. In PPR, he's a top 20 guy. It's great, but can we trade him in, all right, for a Quentin Johnson maybe returning off of injury? Most likely. So we will have the trades show in a couple days. You guys love that show. You've been showing some great support. I appreciate it. So it's actually going to be tomorrow. But yeah, for now, that's where we're at with Olave and the Saints. A good game, but an annoying one. Trey McBride will move into the tight ends. Had his best game of the year, except Kyler Murray was not active. So it just kind of tells you what you need to know about Murray right now. And I've always been a Murray supporter, but sometimes the proof is pretty obvious here. McBride caught 8 of 11 targets from Brissett. That tied the season high, his 11 targets. His 72 yards was second most on the year. Caught a touchdown for the second time this year. So happy to see that he's scoring touchdowns. Trey McBride firmly in the tight end 1 overall conversation rest of season. We had Tyler Warren just absolutely dominate yet again. These early touchdowns from Warren, 9 targets, 6 catches, got in the end zone, 63 yards, 18.3 points. His last 3 games, 18.3, 14.4, and 18.3 again. So, McBride, Warren, Kittle, Bowers, when they come back, and Ferguson is your top 5. It's pretty obvious in no order any given week. Excuse me. When Bowers comes back fully healthy in week 9, he will be my tight end 1. And that's just how it is. That's just how I rank. All right. We move on now to Harold Fannin. He's the last tight end we'll talk about in this portion of the show. Oh, not that guy. We don't want Harold Landry. We want Harold Fannin. Okay. So David Njoku left the game with an injury. Who knows if he comes back, but Fannin, season high 10 targets, season high 81 receiving yards, and caught his season high of 7 catches he had all the way back in week 1. So really a great game. Gets Miami at home next week. David Njoku left, and this guy really is just an integral part of the offense. You got the bye week coming up. He could get even better. We've seen Cedric Tillman go on IR and nobody really step up. We look at Jerry Jeudy. He had 13 targets yesterday. That's awesome. He can't catch them. I don't know if you guys saw the drop, but they get thrown at his number, and he just cannot catch them. So, yeah, unstartable. Jeudy, absolutely unstartable. Sell high on the targets. We'll look at who else on this team. Bond, let's see what he did yesterday. Isaiah Bond, 5 targets, but, nothing special with them, only caught 2. So Harold Fannin really is the lead target guy here at the moment in terms of valuable targets, doing things with those targets. I'd be surprised if he doesn't score next week against Miami. An easy defense, an offense in Miami that can put up points. They're going to need him. We'll move into the QB section real quick, and we will discuss Drake Maye. Now, Drake Maye, 3 touchdowns yesterday for the first time this season, through the air, I should say. 200-plus passing yards in every game. So that's basically a floor of 8 points. He gets a touchdown. You're looking at 12 points or 14 points. And then from there, anything else is just ceiling, where you're hitting these top 5 weeks for QB basically every week. Now, played at New Orleans, but then at Tennessee next week. There's not much to be concerned about. Against Cleveland in week 8, maybe that'll be tough. Atlanta, maybe. But then you get Tampa Bay, the Jets, Cincinnati, Giants. The schedule's looking real good for Drake Maye. And I have him, honestly, top 10, if not top 8 QB rest of season. We will talk about a little bit of some stuff from Thursday. We have Jaxson Dart here, 50-plus rushing yards, guys. Again, in every start this season. As you can see, week 4, 54 yards. Week 5, 55. And then we have week 6, 58 yards. This is just what you love to see from the QB position because the receiving stuff doesn't really matter, the throwing stuff doesn't really matter that much. And with rookie QBs, oftentimes they need some time to develop in that area. But then you get a game like New Orleans, for example, 2 interceptions, so that kills him. But you get 40 attempts, only completed 26, but that will get better. So 47 opportunities total for Jaxson Dart in week 5. Then against Philly, a tough defense, comes back, season high 13 rushes, gets in the end zone. So he's a high-end QB2 weekly, just that floor is a little more volatile. Now with Cam Skattebo, we'll kind of stick with the Thursday night theme for a second. 3 rushing touchdowns. Interestingly enough, that is something Saquon Barkley has never done in a game, which is pretty cool. Obviously, I think Barkley might have had receiving, maybe 2 rushing, but he's never scored 3 rushing touchdowns in a game. And credit to the fantasy footballers for that stat. Love that show. And they mentioned that. I just thought that was a great nugget to put in here. So Tyrone Tracy came back, and he has, he is no threat here to the workload. 4 carries for 6 yards. Skattebo, 21 opportunities, over 5 a carry. An absolute monster. And we're just looking at top 18, top 16 running back rest of season. Denver, Philly again in week 8. Denver week 7. So it's tough to predict with him, but he's just an RB2 in your lineup, all right, pretty comfortably. Now we look at Josh Jacobs, and Josh Jacobs scored again. I think he actually got in the end zone twice, so that's 21 touchdowns in his last 17 games without leaving early or, getting benched in a blowout or whatever. So he's a top 8 running back rest of season, if not better. Already had the bye. It just makes his value so much higher. Okay, 23 opportunities, over 5 a carry, 2 on the ground against Cincinnati, but then they got Arizona, Pittsburgh, Carolina, Philly, Giants. I'm not scared of any of these games. We go over to Rachaad White real quick. So long as Rachaad is filling in here, we're looking at a high-end RB2. And honestly, when Bucky comes back, we could see more of the split we had from last year. The concern with Bucky was always he's a bit undersized. Can he handle this massive workload of 74% plus snaps, 70% plus snaps that he'd been seeing? And I don't know yet. It looked like he could. Now he's hurt. We look at the snaps, right? This is way up from last year, 76, 71, 74. We look at the end of last year, okay, 57, 55. He had one game at 72. Awesome. But during this run where he was great, 52, 54, 44, putting up points, and then we jump him. The coaching staff jumps him to 70 plus every single game. No wonder he got hurt, being 190 pounds, 5'10". Okay, so with Rachaad White, I think that if you can sell him early in the week, like if you could sell him for a true RB2 rest of season, like a Skattebo or something, like you work a deal, Rachaad White plus a flex for Skattebo, you're bumping up from, starting next week, you're bumping up from a very good handcuff with minimal standalone value, you don't really want to start him, to a solid RB2. I'd be looking to do things like that, okay? But yeah, any more games where Bucky Irving's out, he's a top 15 running back. And that's going to do it, guys, for kind of the review. I will talk a little bit about last night. I didn't do it in the write-up, but we have St. Brown, we have Gibbs, okay, we have Jameson Williams. Some interesting thoughts from this game. This was an interesting one for sure. Excuse me. So we mentioned when these Lions are in games where they might not win and they don't just steamroll teams like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Gibbs, someone is going to suffer a little bit. Last night it was Gibbs. And I guess you could say Monty, even though he had that throw for a touchdown taken back. Okay? Yeah, Monty only 8.1 points in PPR. Gibbs only 7.5. So they really stopped these running backs from having these explosive plays. I mean, you look at Gibbs, 19 opportunities, we take that all day. 65 yards is actually pretty good. It's higher than like 3 of his games this year. You look at Monty, not so good on the ground, 4 for 24, but if he got in the end zone through that touchdown pass, you could have your typical Monty game, your good game. But yeah, we look at St. Brown. He only had 45 yards, ties his season low. Caught 9 catches though. So St. Brown's a little bit more bulletproof. He got the 10 targets, his second most of the year. When he drops that ball, you see the coaching staff and Goff just lean into him. For example, give him more work, but we should downgrade these guys a little more in games that are going to be like they might lose them. And I'm not talking about Tampa Bay in week 7 at home. Very happy with that. I think you're going to get a massive over-under. It's a Monday night game. It's going to be awesome. Minnesota week 9 at home. I'm good with that. Washington, I'm good with that. At Washington. At Philly, that's a little questionable, right? Maybe Philly comes out, pushes their way down the field for 2 straight quarters, runs the clock in that awful Philadelphia offense that literally would rather watch paint dry. Maybe that happens. They're down 14-0 going into the second quarter. Now we have problems at Philly, right? You got the Giants in week 12, Green Bay 13, Dallas in week 14. Oh, baby. At the Rams is an interesting one in week 15. We'll see where they're at in their season, but there's a couple games here where we just got to be aware of that. I'm not too worried. Jameson Williams did break out yesterday, season high in targets, catches, and got in the end zone for the second time this year. That was awesome. It wasn't a monster game, but 18.6 in PPR. You're very happy with that. All right. What I'd like to do now is transition to the waiver wire portion of the show, and we have a good amount of just random guys who, if you need fill-ins, it's a good week for that. It is not a good week for, blowing the bank of all your fab on someone crazy. Now, Michael Mayer, if you have Brock Bowers, I think he's a fine fill-in for one more week, but you got to prep for this bye week here, and obviously, if he's on bye, Mayer and or Bowers are not going to do anything for you week 8. So you can use Mayer at Kansas City. They're going to be big underdogs. I'm sure they're going to be throwing a lot in week 7. He had 7 targets yesterday, 5 catches, got in the end zone. Nice. Harold Fannin, we talked about him. I think he is actually a priority add. We'll see how severe the Njoku injury is, but yeah, he really took over. I mean, 85% of snaps in week 4, 79 in week 5, and then I'm sure that number was over 70 in week 6, so got to be snagging him. We have K. Dotton, where at Detroit next week, at New Orleans, 2 easy matchups, and we will kind of transition into this Buccaneers portion of the waiver wire where all of the receivers are injured. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Buka left with a hamstring injury, was ruled out very quickly. So I doubt that all 3 of those guys are back next week. Maybe Evans, maybe Godwin. Looks like Ibuka's going to miss it. So you look at K. Dotton, 6 targets yesterday, caught 5, 51 yards, 10.1 points. He gets in the end zone. He's a top 3 tight end on the week. He didn't, but against Detroit, he just might. You saw Kelsey have a nice game. Noah Gray, tight ends did well. Okay, Sterling Shepard will move right along. Now, Sterling Shepard, Tez Johnson, and Cameron Johnson. These are the Bucs receivers underneath those three guys. I mean, they got like 6 wide receivers who were pretty decent. You saw Cameron Johnson actually score yesterday. Whoever Cameron Johnson is from Barton College got in the end zone because Baker Mayfield's playing at an MVP level right now. 4 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. Tez Johnson didn't get in the end zone, didn't catch all those passes, but did get in the end zone. 1 catch, all right, for 45 yards. Maybe he's a nice little streamer. Sterling Shepard, 51 yards on 2 catches. So all these guys against Detroit can be plugged in, played, assuming those top 3 receivers are out. Some more injuries kind of leading to some players that might be interesting. Marvin Harrison got banged up. I think it's a concussion, I actually don't know. Let's see. Hold on, let me look that up. Yeah, he has a concussion, so we'll see if he can play next week. If not, you saw Zay Jones get 8 targets. They have the bye in week 8. Maybe they just let Kyler rest again. You'll get Jacoby Brissett, and you'll get the Jacoby Brissett to Zay Jones show, I guess, again here in week 7 against Green Bay at home, where they're going to probably be down having to throw a lot. Michael Wilson can also be plugged and played in that matchup, honestly, if Brissett is the guy. Talked about Vidal earlier in the show, but yeah, he seems like the golden boy of the waiver wires, but again, we got to be sure they don't go and sign a running back tomorrow, or they don't go and let Hassan Haskins run it 15 times next week. So it's not 100% fab dump here, but a fine fill-in. The matchup is tough versus Indianapolis, so we'll see. But again, I think Vidal is the headliner for this week's waivers. And a guy who kind of went under the radar here was Tyjae Spears. Came back yesterday, scored 9 PPR points. It's actually more than Pollard. Actually played more snaps than Pollard. Had 9 opportunities, 9 touches, Tyjae Spears, so averaged 1 fantasy point per touch, which is very good. Looks like he's ramping up and just didn't have a monster game, but is kind of under the radar as a good add on waivers. I'm sure he's been dropped in many places. Had 9 opportunities. Like I said, Tony Pollard only had 12, 6.7 fantasy points, and it's just not great from Pollard unless he gets in the end zone. I mean, you're really lucky if he scores over 10 without a touchdown. He's had 4 games where he hasn't scored a touchdown. He's only scored over 10 in 1 of them. So he's very touchdown reliant in a bad offense, where Spears comes in and can kind of get these targets. The coaching staff loves him in his prime in terms of age. So Spears is a guy I'm looking at to kind of take over this backfield, and I would just stash him, honestly, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe Pollard gets traded. Maybe Spears gets traded, right? We never know. A lot of teams need RBs right now. It's another reason why with Vidal, we're not dumping 100% of fab. We like him, but we're not dumping 100. So guys, just stay aware out there. And like I said to start the episode, guys, it is not over. It is never over. Whether you're losing, you're winning, it is literally never over. Peace.